Today, I will tell you a story, one that was never meant to be spoken aloud. It is said to come from a scroll hidden beneath centuries of dust, a record of truths too heavy for the living to carry. So listen carefully, for this is not myth, it is memory. And now we begin. Before Adam drew breath, before Eden's river traced its silver path through untouched soil, the earth lay in a silence that no creature could break. It was a silence not of emptiness, but of waiting, as though creation itself held its breath beneath a sky that shimmered without sun or moon. The mountains were young then, their peaks soft and glowing like embers beneath the veil of the early firmament. Ocean stretched outward in stillness, reflecting the invisible movement of divine thought. Ancient fragments describe that age as the first dawn, a moment outside the calendar of men, a hinge of eternity when time had form but no voice. Beneath the surface of that primal stillness, something stirred, not in rebellion, but in obedience to a purpose forgotten by angels and erased from the memory of men. Some said the Spirit moved across the waters as a whisper. Others claimed it was a footstep. Yet nothing living had been fashioned, and still something walked. The old chroniclers wrote that the earth trembled gently in those days, not from chaos, but from recognition, as though it felt the presence of beings who carried both light and dust within them. They did not speak, for language had not yet been gifted to creation. They did not name, for naming belongs only to those with dominion. But they wandered, footprints pressed into soil that had never known a sunrise. Their existence was not written in Scripture, it was buried beneath it. And so the silence of that era remains one of the greatest mysteries ever sealed behind the gates of heaven. The scroll speaks next of the beings who walked that silent earth, figures older than Eden, shaped by a command no prophet ever fully understood. They were not angels, for they bore no wings, no radiance, no glory that sang in the air around them. Yet neither were they mortal, for their forms did not decay, and their steps left impressions that glowed faintly before fading into dust. The ancient chroniclers named them the precedents, those who were formed before the forming, the walkers of an age too fragile for the weight of memory. Their bodies were tall, their movements slow, as though each gesture measured the pulse of the world itself. Light clung to them, not as brilliance, but like a pale outline drawn by the hand of creation before the final stroke. Their faces were veiled in shadow, not by darkness, but by a kind of incompleteness, as though their features had not yet been fully declared by the will that shaped them. They spoke no language, and yet they understood one another, bound by a silent communion older than thought. The scroll says they moved across continents that did not yet bear names. They touched the young forests, pressed their hands to cooling stones, and listened to the breath of the wind still learning how to wander. They built nothing, destroyed nothing, desired nothing, for desire had not been born. Some angels watched them from the higher realms, puzzled by these creatures of dust and dawn, beings who seemed to belong to a story not yet written. Yet the heavens remained silent, offering no explanation for their purpose. And so the precedents walked the early earth in quiet harmony, unaware that their existence itself was a secret, one day destined to be erased. The scroll darkens here, its ink fractured, as though the scribe's hand trembled while writing. for it speaks of the law, a command older than Eden, delivered in a voice no prophet ever recorded, a decree so ancient that even the angels feared to repeat it. The precedents received this law not in words, but in a moment of sudden understanding that echoed through their being like the first heartbeat of creation. It was simple, it was absolute, it was unforgiving. Do not touch the light beneath the earth. The chronicler does not explain what this light was, only that it burned without flame, sang without sound, and called without language. It rested deep within the world, sealed there before the shaping of the firmament. Some claimed it was a remnant of the moment God said, "Let there be light," a seed of unspent creation hidden away from every realm. For a time, the precedents obeyed. They walked the early world in peace, feeling the law like a quiet pressure that guided their steps. But as ages passed without sunrise or death, their silence grew heavy and their wonder deepened into longing. It was not rebellion, it was curiosity, the first spark of desire in a world not yet meant to hold desire. One among them, unnamed, uncarved, faceless in the surviving text, felt the pull strongest. The scroll describes this being kneeling upon a plain of cooling stone, pressing its hand to the trembling ground. Beneath its touch, the hidden light stirred, and the world shuddered. What happened next is written in jagged letters as though scorched into the parchment, and in the moment they touched it, creation cracked. A crack not of stone, but of purpose. The ancient scroll turns cold here, as though the memory it carries chills the parchment itself. For when the precedents broke the ancient law, heaven did not remain a silent witness. One angel, a being of immeasurable stature and unbearable sorrow, descended to watch what unfolded upon the trembling earth. He is called the sentinel of the east wind, not by men, not by prophets, but by the oldest of angels whose names have long dissolved into forgotten tongues. The sentinel did not arrive in brilliance. He descended like a fading star, wings dimmed, light muted, as though heaven itself failed him to prevent the earth from collapsing beneath his glory. The scroll describes him standing upon a plain of newly fractured stone, watching the precedents with eyes made of the first morning, yet burdened by the last. He could not interfere. This was the cruelty of his task. Commanded to witness, forbidden to prevent, he stood as the precedents gathered around the wound they had opened in the world. A thin, luminous fissure from which spilled the forbidden light beneath the earth. The light rose like breath, twisting the air, bending the shadows, casting shapes that were not shapes. The precedent who first touched the light staggered back, its form flickering like a lantern without oil. No scream escaped it, for the precedents had no voices. Yet the earth itself cried out, a deep groan echoing across mountains still too young to hold such sorrow. The sentinel lifted his hand not to strike, but in grief. He recorded everything, every tremor, every shift in creation, every silent cry. For angels were commanded to bear witness to transgression, even when the transgressors did not understand the weight of their actions. The Chronicles says his wings dimmed further with each moment. He watched as the precedents drew back, terrified of the light, terrified of themselves. Yet the rift they had opened did not close, and the sentinel, bound by divine decree, turned his face toward heaven, waiting for the command that never came. The scroll grows heavier here, the script pressed deep, as though the scribe carved the truth into the parchment with dread. For what followed, the breaking of the ancient law, was not immediate fire, nor a thunderous decree, nor the wrath later known to prophets. Instead, creation itself delivered the punishment. The precedents were scattered, not by wind or quake, but by a force older than judgment, a divine dispersal that tore them from one another and hurled them across the newborn earth. One found itself cast into the hollow of a vast cavern beneath mountains that had not yet risen. Another was thrust into the depths of a valley where rivers would one day flow. Others vanished beneath deserts that did not yet bear dunes. They did not die, for death had not yet been fashioned. But neither did they remain whole. Their forms, once steady as dawn, flickered with fractures of light, as though the forbidden radiance they touched now lived inside their bodies, burning slowly, reshaping them in ways heaven did not intend. The scroll writes, "They became as shadows with memory, unable to ascend, unable to perish." The sentinel of the east wind watched their scattering with grief so profound that even his wings were said to tremble. Yet he still received no command, no voice from heaven, no divine verdict to end their suffering. Angels who later studied the record said the silence of God in that moment was not neglect, but mourning. For the first time in creation, something had fallen. Long before Eden, long before Adam, the earth held exile, and in their wandering torment, the precedents roamed the world as silent remnants of a transgression that predated sin. Their shadows moved through young forests, across plains not yet shaped by foot or hoof, into caverns where darkness had never known a companion. Some prophets, centuries later, believed that the earliest tremors of the earth, the quakes before the flood, were echoes of these beings dragging their sorrow across creation. The precedents had touched the forbidden light, and now the world itself carried their punishment. The chronicle now turns toward the earth itself, to places buried so deeply beneath soil and stone that no generation of man has ever uncovered them. For the precedents, scattered and reshaped by the forbidden light within them, sought refuge in their torment. And so they built, not cities, not altars, but sanctuaries, temples older than Eden. The scroll describes these structures in fragments as though the scribe had seen them only in trembling visions. Their pillars were carved from untouched rock, their walls veined with faint luminescence, the lingering glow of the light they once touched. No tools shaped them. The precedents molded stone by laying their hands upon it, their grief sinking into the earth and leaving form behind. In those sanctuaries they gathered in small, broken assemblies, their bodies flickering like flame behind smoke. They pressed inscriptions into the walls, not with language, but with patterns of light, flowing lines that curved and trembled like the memory of a vanished sunrise. These markings were prayers, pleas, confessions. They begged for mercy from a God whose face they no longer saw. The sentinel of the east wind walked among their hidden temples, unseen by them, yet burdened by their sorrow. He watched as they knelt before the trembling walls, touching their foreheads to the ground, though they had no words with which to repent. The scroll claims his tears fell like small stars, sinking into the stone, leaving faint scars still buried beneath continents. The temples grew numerous, beneath mountains, beneath deserts, beneath plains that would one day bear names sung by kings. Each sanctuary held a single, haunting symbol carved at its center, a circle split by a crack of light, the mark of their transgression, the mark they could neither escape nor forget. Prophets centuries later would speak of wells of ancient sorrow hidden beneath the nations, places where the earth seemed to breathe grief. Scholars dismissed them, scribes avoided them, but the scroll is clear. Those wells were the buried temples of the precedents, monuments of beings older than Adam, older than Eden, older than the world as we know it. Here the scroll takes on a strange, trembling rhythm, as though the scribe struggled to capture something that was not meant to be heard by mortal ears. For after the precedents built their hidden sanctuaries and carved their sorrow into stone, something began to rise from within them. Not rebellion, not hope, music. But it was music unlike any sung by angels or shaped by human throat. It was the sound of beings who had no voices yet carried within them the echo of the forbidden light. Their grief vibrated through their bodies, through the cracked contours of their forms, through the sanctuaries they had shaped with trembling hands. The scroll says the sound began as a faint hum, like a memory waking beneath the earth. It spread through caverns and tunnels, causing stones to quiver and dust to rise in shimmering patterns. The mountains themselves began to resonate with the lament, a low, aching tone that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of creation. Ancient prophets would later call this sound the music under the earth. They said it was the first lamentation in existence, the first sorrow ever given form, and those who claimed to hear it described it as both beautiful and unbearable, like a sunrise collapsing, like a prayer spoken after hope has died. According to the scroll, this music seeped into the very bones of the planet. Fault lines trembled, caves grew wider, the early earth groaned beneath the weight of a grief it could not contain. Some angels trembled when they heard it from afar, recognizing the resonance of the forbidden light, a sound born not from rebellion, but from the wound left by touching what should never have been touched. The sentinel of the east wind stood alone on a ridge above a hidden valley, listening as the lament rose like smoke from the sanctuaries below. His wings dimmed further, not from punishment, but from sorrow, for he knew what the precedents did not. No voice from heaven would answer their song. Creation itself carried their mourning, and the sound of their sorrow would echo through the deepest places of the earth, long after their names were forgotten, long after Adam was formed from dust, long after humanity walked unaware above ancient wounds. The scroll enters its most fragile section here. The ink faded, the parchment strained, as though the memory itself resisted being carried forward. For in this part, the chronicler speaks of a prophet, one whose name is lost, whose lineage is forgotten, whose existence lingers only in fragments carved into ancient clay. He lived long before Abraham, long before Babel, in an age where the earth still remembered the footsteps of the precedents. This prophet did not seek visions. They found him. Night after night, he was seized by dreams that did not belong to mortals, dreams that carried him into caverns beneath mountains that would not rise for another 1,000 years. He saw beings of trembling light wandering through their sanctuaries, touching walls etched with sorrow, their forms flickering like lamp flames in a windless room. The scroll says he beheld their eyes, eyes that held neither iris nor pupil, yet glimmered with something that was almost human, regret. Eyes that reflected the memory of a world God himself buried, a world so ancient that even angels spoke of it only in silenced breath. The prophet awoke each time trembling, his throat raw from a cry he never remembered releasing. He tried to flee the visions, but they followed him into the daylight, shadows shifting at the edge of his sight. Faint tremors beneath the ground, a soft humming echoing in the stones beneath his dwelling. At last he wrote what he saw. The surviving fragments read, "Beneath us walk those who walked before us. They wander in sorrow. They wait in silence. They remember what we were forbidden to know." He warned his people, but they could not understand him. For his vision spoke of ages older than the world they knew. Some believed he had gone mad. Others feared he had glimpsed a realm sealed by God for reasons no mortal should question. Yet the prophet knew the truth. Humanity did not walk alone upon the earth, not in the beginning, not now. For the precedents, the first walkers, the bearers of forbidden light, still moved beneath the thresholds of creation, unseen but not gone, sorrowing but not silenced. And each night, as the prophet lay down to sleep, he felt the ground tremble softly beneath him, as though something ancient passed by, remembering him. The scroll shifts here into a tone of finality, as though the scribe could feel the end of an age pressing against his hand. For after the prophet recorded his visions, after the precedent's lament shook the hidden chambers of the earth, heaven at last issued a command, not of wrath, not of destruction, erasure. The chronicles says the order moved through the angelic realms like a silent wind, reaching the sentinel of the east wind as he stood above a trembling valley. His wings lifted, not in triumph, but in resignation, for he knew what such a command meant. Creation would not destroy the precedents. It would forget them. A decree went forth. Seal them from memory. Hide them beyond the reach of man. Let the new world rise without their shadow. And so the angels descended, not with swords, but with veils of blinding light. They entered the hidden sanctuaries one by one, touching the trembling walls, causing the inscriptions of sorrow to fade like mist in morning sun. The precedents, unable to flee, lifted their fractured forms toward the radiance, not in fear, but in hope that perhaps mercy had come. It had not. The angels placed upon them a seal that no mortal tongue can describe, a silence so deep that it severed their existence from the memory of creation. The sanctuaries collapsed into the earth. Mountains grew over their temples. Rivers redrew the land. Time itself thickened like a curtain. When the work was finished, the sentinel bowed his dimmed wings, for he alone understood the weight of what had been done. The precedents were not judged, not forgiven, not destroyed. They were removed from the story. Only then did God shape Adam from the dust, a humanity formed upon a cleansed world, knowing nothing of those who had walked before, nothing of the temples buried beneath their feet, nothing of the sorrow that once shook the earth. The scroll ends this part with a single haunting line, and the world awoke as though the first dawn had never been broken. The final fragment of the scroll is the most unsettling, not for its violence, but for its quiet truth. For after the angels sealed the precedents from memory, after their sanctuaries collapsed and their names dissolved into silence. Creation did not fully forget them. It could not. The deepest places of the earth still trembled with their presence. The lowest caverns, untouched by sun or star, still held echoes of beings who never died, never ascended, never truly vanished. The scroll calls this realm the threshold beneath creation, a place not counted among the heavens or the earth, where the forgotten wait without time. The precedents dwell there still, flickering forms caught between light and shadow, lingering at the edge of a silence too ancient for angels to break. They do not sleep, they do not speak, they do not age, but they remember. The sentinel of the east wind, long after humanity filled the world, descended once more to the boundary of that hidden realm. His wings were nearly extinguished, dim as the last glow of a fading ember. He listened, and from beneath the crust of mountains and seas he heard it, a faint hum, a lament older than sin, a sorrow the world could bury but never silence. The chronicle ends with his final testimony. They wait for a command that has never come. Some say this is why the deepest trenches of the ocean groan, why caves echo with tones no instrument can mimic, why prophets still dream of beings they cannot name. The precedents are not gone. They are sealed beneath dust, beneath stone, beneath the memory of creation itself. And when the last trumpet sounds, when all things hidden are revealed, when the foundation of the earth is split open, those who walked before Adam will rise to stand beside those who came after him. Until then, the world remains unaware, living above ancient temples, above sealed sorrow, above a story erased so thoroughly that only this broken scroll survived to tell it. And now the chronicle closes. The earth is quiet once more, but the silence is not empty.